let's get started right away, Prerna. Let me first talk about how about we start with a little bit about yourself, your background, and about your Sampradaya and the Vaishnava upbringing. Because today is Ramanujacharya's birthday, and I want to talk about how he, what you have been doing, how your background is, and we will talk about him as the story that we were discussing earlier. So please go ahead.
Thank you so much and for having me. So a quick intro. I grew up mostly in I did most of my schooling in Abu Dhabi in the Gulf, and then I came back to India, studied here for a while, and then left New Zealand, studied there for a while, lived there for a while, and now I'm back here in India. So today I'll be presenting to you both the outsider and the insider perspective, the ethic and the emic point of view. I come from a family of doctors, so both my parents they studied medicine and did their MD from All India Institute of Medical Sciences. Coming from a Sri Vaishnava background, my mother is the disciple of His Holiness Pedaji Swami Varu, and I'm the disciple of His Holiness Chinaji Swami Varu here in Hyderabad. And my research actually began in 2017 with Rajiv Malhotraji. In fact, I started reading about him and following him back in 2009 when I was still in New Zealand. And life came full circle when I was able to present papers at his Swadeshi Indology conference here in India. So ever since then, I've been into research publishing. But my Acharya, His Holiness Chinaji Swami Varu, was the person who actually understood or that there was a big gap between the academia and the grassroots level workers. So following his advice, I actually started working on the ground as well, working in the rural areas where there's a lot of politicization and Dalit atrocities which are happening on the ground, to bridge that gap between the academia and the grassroots level workers. So that's actually how it started. So I come from a family of doctors and Sri Vaishnavas, very Hindu upbringing, even though it was abroad, it was very much a Hindu upbringing. So, like I said, I will be presenting the the emic and the ethic perspective, because I'm someone who's lived and studied abroad, as well as lived and studied here and worked here in India as well. So, coming from an academic background and also working on the ground, like His Holiness Chinaji had observed, and also whether it's Rajiv Malhotraji or any of the Indic stalwarts we have over here, they all agree that there is a big gap between the academia and the grassroots level workers. What actually happens on the ground is quite different from what is actually published in the academia, whether it's in India or abroad.
That's very interesting. Okay. I remember we were talking about a story about Sri Ramanujacharya. So maybe you want to just narrate that story about his background, his guru, and everybody else.
Yes, thank you so much. Hagiography plays a very important role in the Sri Vaishnava Sampradaya because of this hagiography that has been protected so carefully by the devotees and the followers of the Sampradaya. We now have evidence of how, forward his thinking was, not just as an Acharya, but a person who led the Dalit entry into temples back in the 10th and the 11th century itself. So some of the important key people who influenced Bhagavad Ramanuja were his Purva Acharyas, namely Mahapurna. Mahapurna was his one of his Acharyas. He had many great Acharyas, 5 main Acharyas, and Yamunacharya was the Purva Acharya of Mahapurna, of Ramanuja, and the story goes like this. This has been narrated by my Acharya Chinaji Swami Varu. Mahapurna and his best friend Marineri Nambi were disciples of Yamunacharya. Yamunacharya was a high-class Brahmin. Mahapurna was a high-class Brahmin, all Sri Vaishnavas. And Marineri Nambi, who belonged to the Dalit class, was also a disciple of Yamunacharya. So when Marineri Nambi knew that he was going to die, when he turned old and he knew that death was approaching, he requested his best friend Mahapurna to perform his last rites, because he knew that his family members would not be able to either perform the rituals according to the Sri Vaishnava, edicts, the weight is done. So when you take up the Pancha Samskara or the Samarshana, where the conch and the chakra are cauterized on your shoulders, that is a diksha that is taken. So he knew that his family would probably not be able to do his last rites properly because of the lack of knowledge. So he asked Mahapurna to do it, and Mahapurna happily agreed to perform the last rites of his friend. When he was asked, how is it that a high class Brahmin like you is performing the last rites, the Charma Samskara of a Dalit, his answer was, when Sri Ramachandra was able to perform the last rites of Jatayu, who am I? I'm not greater than Jatayu or Sri Ramachandra, and this is my Guru Bhrata. So that is how, so this is just a small example of how the Sampradaya and the functioning and the hierarchy and everything works.
Wonderful, wonderful story. And that's a great way for us to understand the framework. Like, I've always argued that the narrative that we see today in our society is very linear. But this whole picture in the society, in the broader Indian society, or you can even call it South Asian society, is much more complex. And I think over the years, as we discuss more and more, certainly with you, Prernaji, we're going to be having more and more of these sessions to kind of break down that complexity into more simpler things for people to understand. Because and that actually leads me to my next question. Caste, the word caste itself, in quotes, I would say, has been talked a lot lately, and we are seeing certain university student bodies in California recommending that their administration include anti-caste discrimination policies in the universities. California, the state of California, will also file a lawsuit against Cisco alleging caste discrimination by one of the employees. Then we have the city of Santa Clara's Human Rights Commission looking at to include anti-caste policy. But all of these arguments, the way I look at it, they try to define and sort of hone in and demonize one particular religion, which is Hinduism. And they also use very colonial definitions of this whole idea of caste, right? And I use the word caste in quotations because it's not really a native word when it comes to our culture and our tradition and stuff like that. So can you talk a little bit about the idea of the whole jati, varna, sampradaya, like kula, different types of groupings, social groupings that existed within the Hindu society and the broader Indian society? Were these hierarchical? Are they always oppressive as they are shown? Do they have spiritual sanction, like some of these resolutions talk about that? This whole oppression has spiritual sanction as claimed by the highest Hindu texts and things like that. Maybe you want to just talk about that a little bit.
Okay, so everybody might be aware that the word caste is from the Portuguese word casta, and we in Bharat, in India, use the word varna, jati, or kulam. And a definition of jati, a loose translation of the word jati, would mean the origin of a species. So either you're born from an egg or a mammal. So that's how it's actually classified. So I can give you a little bit more about it. So Udbhaja, coming out of the ground like plants, Andaja, coming out of eggs like birds and reptiles, Pindaja, mammals, and Ushmaj, so reproducing because of temperature. So conditions like virus and bacteria. So it's actually the origin of the species, and this is what jati is. However, what has happened now is jati has, over the years, so this is the actual meaning what I've told you of the word jati, but over the years it's been used in a broader term to include all kinds of groups or communities of people, but still not caste, still not the same thing. And varna, on the other hand, was about your gunas. So from the Bhagavad Gita, guna karma vibhagashah. So the gunas of each person, varying on whether they belong to the sattva, raja, or the tamasa. So they're basically three gunas in any human being. Something like their energy or their thinking or their aura. Or their intellectual capacity. It could mean a lot of things, because Sanskrit is the kind of language that can have one single word, like can have multiple meanings, and most of these words can have multiple meanings depending on the context. which is also very important. So Varna, basically, you have the Chatur Varna or the Trivarnika system. In the Chatur Varna, we have the Brahman, Kshatriya, Vaishya, and the Shudra, also the Antaja. So what actually happened was the word Kula or the word Kulam, which is most commonly used in Telugu, which is my mother tongue, is based on the Trivarnika model. So this Trivarnika model, what actually happened was there was a lot of cross-country migration that was happening. Cross-country migration of tribes was very prevalent during the invasions. So India has suffered a lot of invasions, and during that time, what would happen was tribesmen were individualistically skilled in multiple forms of art, trade, including agriculture, artisan, leathery, tannery, weaving, tribal, shaman, you name it. And just so that we could actually have a right come duty, so that labor would not be overpowered by one particular tribe or one particular group. This is how they used to divide the society into kulams. So anything that wouldn't fit into that Trivarnika system would fit into the kulam. And kulam would mean that, for example, even today in the Dalits, you have the Malas, you have the Madigas, you have the, in Maharashtra, you have the Mahars, you have the Chamars, you have like so many different groupings, but they all come under the scheduled caste in terms of the government and the constitution, right? So these, if I can briefly explain, the jati was the origin or the species, the clubbing of the species. That was the original meaning. Varna was based on the Chatur Varna, based on a person's mental capabilities. And there was also a lot of inter Varna migration. There are several examples of that, where a Kshatriya like Vishwamitra became a Brahmin, several others like that. And so Varna was interchangeable, and there are several examples of it. And Kulam was basically about right come duty, so that there was labor for all and there was equality within the society and nobody was overtaking anybody else's job. That was more of a social construct. That was the Kulam.
So it was like a division of labor, basically, where you are a specialization between the different jatis. So one jati would basically perform one function and it's not overtaken by another jati, kind of like some of the European guilds that we have seen.
Kulam, the Kulam.
Kulam, sorry, yes, Kulam.
Species. Jati is a species. Were you born from an egg, from a human being, from a through mammal, the birth from an egg? Or
got it. More. So jati is the origin, and then Kulam was kind of the division of the labor / rights and duty. Okay.
Yeah, that was a societal thing to keep, labor based on each person's specialty. This originated during the invasion, so that one tribe does not overtake or completely monopolize a certain trade or art form or anything like that.
Now, was that spiritually sanctioned?
Okay, so spiritually speaking, if we are talking about Sanatana Dharma, we believe in the Atman, right? Atman again is not the soul. So we believe in the Sharira, which is the body, which is Achit, non-sentient. And then you have the Jivatma, which is sentient. So it is your sentient Jivatma who thinks about the Paramatma, that is God, and wants to be in the service or unite with God and attain moksha. So this Varna, Caste, Jati, Kulam, is it for my Sharira, which is the Achita, or is it for my Jivatma? Or is it, my connection between my Paramatma and the Jivatma? Is that linked to Jati, Varna, Caste, Kulam, or anything like that? This is a basic question that any person, whether any self-respecting Hindu or anybody who's questioning a self-respecting Hindu needs to ask, ponder, think about, and answer.
So in that case, yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
This is the essence of Sanatana Dharma. Is the caste for my body or is it for my atma?
Right. So that's really interesting because in the in the let's say in the Bhagavad Gita in chapter 18 they talk about the qualities of each of the varnas, right? So the first is when Sri Krishna says guna karma vibhashata, right? So I am dividing the society based not on hierarchy but guna karma, based on deeds, based on personality. That's the division basically. So that's one of the definitions. And then chapter 18 actually lays out what the Brahmin should be doing, the litmus test, the highest qualification of each of the traditions. So, and so I would argue that sometimes people think that, I was born a Brahmin, but, I don't do anything related to Brahmin. So am I a Brahmin, right? The idea is no, because the litmus test is if you don't follow those qualities, just like, let's say you are a scientist and you decide to not follow any of those qualifications. So therefore, you're not eligible, technically speaking, from a spiritual perspective to be that person, even if you're born in that particular category. So I think there is that confusion that people may have from a spiritual sanction perspective. But coming back to your point, as Hindus, we think like that from a sort of an Atman perspective. But sometimes people talk about this, as I was telling you in the resolutions they had, the whole idea that this idea of caste has been spiritually sanctioned. And do you think that that is actually true, or you don't think that's true?
How can it be spiritually sanctioned? Like, what is the pramanas for it? Is there like a shastra pramana? Is there an is it there in our holy scriptures? Is there an acharya pramana? Is there some guru who's sitting up there and telling you that this is how it's supposed to be? Is there some acharya pramana? So is it something that has been followed by generations, like family after family after family? Is that knowledge that is coming down, intergenerational knowledge that is being passed down? On what basis is this being propagated?
Yeah. No, good point. And we'll come back to that because that's a very important discussion. Now, we talked about Varna and Jati and all this. How does that come, when you talk about that construct, Kulam, how does caste come into the picture? We talked about this before when you and I were having a conversation. How does one go from that to the caste system framework? How did the society change because of, like, when you talk about foreign invasions, colonization, degeneration of practices? What are your thoughts on that?
Okay, so like I spoke to you, spiritually speaking, for Sanatana Dharma, caste is not relevant when it comes to the practice of spirituality in Sanatana Dharma. There is no way, because that just doesn't make sense. When you're talking about Vedanta, whether it is Advaita, Vishishtadvaita, or Dvaita, nowhere does this thing about the Sharira and the caste, or the Jivatma and the Paramatma's connection come into the picture. However, speaking, the society, the dharmic society of Bharat was actually divided post these invasions, because it is not essential to Sanatana Dharma. Caste is not essential to Sanatana Dharma, at least spiritually speaking. Maybe Kulam, like we discussed, as a societal construct for division of labor, right cum duty, that was there. However, spiritually speaking, caste is not essential to Sanatana Dharma in any way, right? So during the invasions, whether it was the Islamic or the British invasion, when these invaders were not able to understand the division of the society or the spiritual inclination of the people of Bharat, with their Islamist or with their Western mindset, I guess there was some flaw in there. And of course, the linguistic barrier as well. They were probably not able to understand how Bharat works. And coming down to the most, post-independence or pre-independence of India, there were great people like Baba Sahib, who actually had this whole division of the scheduled caste based on, see, again, if you go through the constitutional division of the caste, especially the scheduled caste and the tribal caste, it's a big mess. It's a big, huge confusion. It's Kulam was actually made because there were a lot of castes and tribes and communities that wouldn't fit into the Trivarnika or the Chaturvarnika system, right? The same way, a lot of communities were just clubbed together. If you remember, we were even talking about uh, uh, the thugs, the communities, yeah, labeled as the thugs of Hindustan, and they were also put into the scheduled caste and the scheduled tribe, right? So I think the mess of this caste system happened because of the Western or Islamic lens with which our society was divided, and also because of the failure to understand our culture, our spirituality, our language, or how our society functions.
No, that's true, exactly, and that's what it's funny you bring that up because from a race theory perspective,
It's happening again. Caste.
exactly, yeah. So you're saying caste is showing us race right now, right? It's kind of you're rewinding the tape by you're going back to the colonial times where they mixed the theories of caste and race. When you look at Riesli or when you look at others who used very freely the idea of tribes, caste, race, totems, all these different words.
Very, very loosely.
Yeah.
In fact, it's been interchanged. It's been used so loosely. Like I told you, jati is how these species originated. But look what is happening to the meaning of the word jati now. In the same way, if you see now the postmodern theory of race and everything, what is happening over there in the US with people like Isabel Wilkerson and everybody. So it's the critical race theory that is now being used as a cookie cutter model, and they're trying to fit it into our Indian subcontinent, into Bharat. It's not going to work because they're not the same things. You know, it's writing something stupid like caste is the bone and race is the skin. That's nonsense. It just doesn't make sense.
Now, not when it comes to Indian society. And what's really
No.
amazing to me, exactly, and that's the same way that the British colonizers thought of it, right? They just tried to simplify it and everything through the lens of caste because they needed to govern India, and so they had to pick a way to do that. So they selectively picked a few texts and selectively picked a few categories. So then you also all of a sudden had this like monster of caste, right? The word caste, as we were talking earlier, was a Portuguese word, right? That made it into the English language. And I think that's where the issue comes in. And so today we see the impact of that even in India, because in the 35 or so, right, the British created that schedule, which is now used called the schedule caste and schedule tribes.
To date.
Exactly. And that's we have about 5,000 so-called quote unquote castes, right, in India because of that whole and then out of that, whatever the schedule caste, schedule tribe schedule itself is. And that's causing a lot of issues. So I'm glad you brought that up because we'll talk about the ground reality a little bit also, because I think it's really important for us to focus on that. But let's talk about this whole concept of the underprivileged classes, right? The word Dalit and the concept of being a Dalit. But I know based on what you mentioned, your lived experience. I want to talk about your lived experience in your sampradaya as an idea, like this whole word Dalit or the oppressed classes. How does that work in your sampradaya? What is your experience first?
So, in the Sri Vaishnava Sampradaya, using words like Dalit or asking somebody's caste is actually considered very disrespectful, because all Bhagavatas, in fact, Bhagavata, going and asking a Bhagavata their caste is as disrespectful as it can get, at least in the Sri Vaishnava Sampradaya, in the Tengalai. So, in the Sri Vaishnavas, you have the Tengalai and the Vargalai. So at least in my sampradaya with my acharya, that's absolutely a no-no. In fact, he is the person who's actually built the Statue of Equality, which is right here in Hyderabad. The Panchaloha statue of Bhagavad Ramanuja, and it's the world's largest sitting statue. So it is a statue of equality. So asking the caste, and it's actually like insulting a person.
Okay.
So that doesn't work in the Sri Vaishnava Sampradaya. And also in India, the word Dalit, it's not mentioned in the constitution. And the word Dalit, I'm sure a lot of people already know, means broken or split. And that's not there in our constitution, but it is used very loosely, as a political term to club the scheduled caste and the scheduled tribes, to club them together and to make it easier during a political talk or a narrative. The word Dalit is used. So I'm not very comfortable with the word Dalit personally, but unfortunately, that's the word that's used in the in the media or in mainstream politics as well.
Yeah. So it's more the political side of it, right? Rather than the actual, because earlier you mentioned different types of, different types of kulams and jatis, the different ones that you mentioned, but nowhere did you mention the word Dalit. So from a textual perspective, from the colloquial perspective, it's not really used. But I believe, if I'm not mistaken, with the Jyotiba Phule coining that term earlier, and then it became a little bit more popular a little bit later. But in the 1970s, when the Dalit Panthers actually tried to make this word even more popular, and then it became like more of a political word.
It became political mainstream. So basically, if you're going to speak to rural in the rural areas, if you're going to speak to absolutely people who have nothing to do with politics or who follow the news or anything, I'm not talking like really rural India. If you ask them what caste are you or you have to use the word kulam, and if you ask them kulam, they'll actually tell you what is the name of their kulam if they actually know about it. But this word Dalit, I have never heard anybody use it except for in the politics and media and in the cities.
Now, within that category, right? We were talking about this before. There is also sort of a difference, right? So sometimes one of the kulams might think that there's higher than lower. So can you talk a little bit more about the dynamics within the community itself?
Yes. So what has happened is this hierarchy is not being clearly defined. Okay, so even in the Chaturvarnya, it's not like the Brahmin is supposed to be, so the Brahmin is supposed to be intellectually superior, right? But not financially superior, or knowledge-wise, he might be, supreme. But then again, if you technically go through the Shastras and everything, or all the Pramanas, Acharya, Achara, all those Pramanas, uh, the Brahmin is not supposed to own any land. He's supposed to be a political advisor, but not in mainstream politics. So there are so many rules. The Kshatriyas are supposed to rule, and the Vaishyas are supposed to be the traders, and Shudras are supposed to be, in the service industry, whichever, service industry it could have been. But the problem, what has happened is this hierarchy within the caste is also the hierarchy and the dynamics within the, for example, within the Dalit community, within the Shudras, you have the Malas, you have the Madigas, and then you have the tribals. The Malas will not get married to the Madigas, and the Madigas are considered lower than the Malas. So intercaste dynamics is also a little funny here. That's why it's very hard to understand this, especially from a Western perspective. And it's not always about endogamy. It's not about endogamy. It's not about finances. It's not trade. It's something much deeper. And if you keep reading and studying about it, it again changes according to the desha, kala, and the paristiti as well, the caste dynamic. So now in India, you have so many castes who belong to the scheduled caste, but they now do not want to be part of the scheduled caste. So there have been rallies in Tamil Nadu. People have been protesting that they do not want to be called SCs anymore. They're also.
Let's repeat that. So I want everybody to understand this point. It's very important. So you're saying that in India, there are people within the scheduled caste, the so-called Dalit areas, that do not want to be in that do not want to be called that.
That's correct.
And there are rallies in India to say that we don't want to be called this.
Yes.
Okay, tell me a little why.
Okay, so up in the north, say in Gujarat, you have the Patels who now want to be called as scheduled caste, but down south in Tamil Nadu, you have the scheduled caste people from a particular community who do not want to be called scheduled caste anymore. Then there are also educated people belonging to the scheduled caste who say that we do not want reservation anymore, no more for. You must have heard about the hashtag, which is even trending right now because of Baba Saheb's Jayanti, no more for. So fourth generation of any scheduled caste family, fourth generation will not avail any reservation, government reservation. They are willingly going to say no. They will contest on their own credit. They will pass their exams or whatever on their own credit.
So no more reservations. The fourth generation doesn't want any more reservations. They want to do it based on solely on the merit. And I think we talked about this before, because when Baba Sahib Ji had formed the constitution,
for a decade.
Yeah, he only wanted for 10 years, just for 10 years, to make sure that the communities that were oppressed and depressed, right, the depressed classes will get a decade to come out of the.
Yeah.
But that has continued for 4 or like 7 decades now, essentially, right? So.
And rightly so. Okay, it must have been the reservation must have been used as a political tool. I agree, it's still being used as a political tool. However, there are a lot of people who criticize the scheduled caste and the scheduled tribe community for availing reservation. The reason I support the reservation, even though it's gone on for 7 decades, I still support it because I have seen what it is on the ground, the reality. They might, so now maybe in 2021 they might be a creamy layer of Dalits, but like I said, there's also the no more for campaigners. Having said that, the reason why I personally believe that reservation should continue for the depressed community, I agree with Baba Sahib on this. The reason being, if you compare a scheduled tribe student who has been raised by a scheduled tribe mother or both parents who've never been to school, the first generation person to go and attend mainstream school could be this child. So the way they are raised, uh, normally if we have children, we normally from the time they're small, you start teaching them phonetics, you start teaching them, you give them those tactile toys, you teach them rhythm, rhymes. And in the Telugu community, you teach them padyalu, and their memory develops and stuff like that. This is not there. I've seen this on the ground. This is not there in the scheduled caste and scheduled tribe community. I'm sure a lot of people, this is a very controversial statement to make. I'm sure a lot of people will disagree with me, but this is what I've seen. So the memory capacity might not be as well developed as a person who's been studying Vedas, and they also have, the 10 generations of family members chanting, reciting, memorizing, mnemonics and phonetics and stuff like that. Compare that with a scheduled caste or scheduled tribe person who's never even, it's always been physical labor, nothing that had to do with intellectual thing. It's not that they are dumb, it's just that you haven't had training. Practice makes perfect. I don't think that this community has had practice. Other backward castes, there's a big disparity.
Yeah, so there's a difference in, because of the opportunities that were not available to them, there has been this thing. So I can agree with you on that, because, like, for example, just looking from an economic sections perspective, right? If you look at American society, once the people who are at the lower economic scale, right, they just don't have the resources. Like, they can't go to kindergarten. They can't go to daycares. They can't, get like fancy toys. They're not able to get these extracurricular classes and things like that. So that opportunity, right, is not available for them itself. Versus if you have a higher economic class, not necessarily by birth, but by economics, by money, right? You have access to all these fancy learning tools, learning opportunities, learning skills, things like that. So I do think that makes a difference. So there is some.
Well, even guidance. Guidance. Also, yeah.
Correct. So that's why I think you're right. From a sort of the economically weaker sections, right? The EWS piece that we were talking earlier, they do need that help. I think that's really, really important from that perspective. So thank you for bringing that up.
Thank you, Nikhil. And also, I just want, since you brought up EWS, I just wanted to tell you about the economically weaker sections. So so we were talking about this critical race theory, about how there's the white supremacy, white patriarchy, whites oppressing the blacks, right? That is all about their race. They try to use that same cookie cutter model and say that there's Brahminical patriarchy, Brahminical supremacy, Brahminical tyranny on the other caste. So if you actually look at the EWS schemes by the government of India, Brahmins and a lot of upper caste people fall under the EWS scheme. If you could please share that slide that I had shown you. What is the criteria for anybody to avail this EWS reservation? So financially speaking, the Brahmin community and the scheduled caste community, both of them are economically weaker section. Brahmins in India also have reservation. I would just like to repeat that again. Brahmins do have reservation in India because they fall under this economically weaker section. So when an economically weaker section of the society is suffering to make their ends meet and is availing government uh, benefits 10% EWS, how are they going to show their supremacy and uh, you know uh, do this whole oppression thing with Dalits? This is my question to all the race theorists sitting there in America without knowing any of this. These
Yeah, so
are
it's
schemes from our government of India.
so
These
you're
are
focusing on more of the economic sections here.
the economic sections.
Yeah, and when you look at the economics, and someone actually made that point in earlier, it's really the economics that's really matters here, because in some places you have the Brahmin communities and others who are super poor, right? There are priests who get paid 25 rupees a month. I mean, that's like 3 cents a month, basically,
Yeah.
their salary and stuff like that. And you have the creamy layer that you mentioned also. So the dynamics is very different in India that most people don't realize in America when they're passing these resolutions or laws that want this reservation here, or like this anti-caste discrimination, all these different things. They need to study this whole concept a lot more. So I'm thankful to you to bringing this point up. Now since we're on this slide, why don't we talk about the piece that you mentioned earlier about this the idea of like the government providing incentives around. There's this idea that this intercaste marriages do not happen in India, and tell me a little bit more about that.
Okay, so the thing is, what actually happened was, even before Ambedkar, way before Baba Saheb could speak about the endogamy and everything else, we have had great, very, 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 very great people right from the 1820s. For example, Raja Ram Mohan Roy of the Brahmo Samaj, 1870, Dayanand Saraswati of the Arya Samaj, or 1920, V. Savarkar, who spoke about Roti Beti. So this thing to break that chain of endogamy, intercaste marriages, basically with the idea of social inclusion. So India, Bharat has always and always, always been about social inclusion, whether it was Bhagwat Ramanuja or whether it was Baba Saheb and everybody in between, always concentrated on social inclusion. And intercaste marriage is something that is encouraged by our government. We have financial incentives to encourage intercaste marriages even today. So as you can see in front of you, I have a graph of the number of crores that have been allocated by the central government. These are incentives to intercaste marriage couples.
So this is actually a government finance. So the way I look at it, in 2013, it was only 30 crores. And today, in 7 years or 8 years, it's 160, 157 crores. So the government in India is actually providing incentive for people to have intercaste marriages. That's really interesting, because that's not talked about normally. There's this whole idea that nothing like this happens. And the fact that the government is actually providing this is very interesting.
Yeah. And there's another slide as well, if you could
yes.
have a look. So this is what is happening. So we have schemes in place, we have policies in place, we have a wonderful functioning government, we have a constitution, we have everything in place here in India. We do not need interference.
Well, let's talk about the whole, we talked about, it's not spiritually sanctioned, but what about before colonization and before the whole invasions? People say, well, the oppression, right? One of the lines that in the resolution was that the Dalits have been facing oppression for the past 2,500 years. That was one of the lines in the resolution. Okay. Now, what is your perspective on that? Is that so systematic for the last 2,500 years? What do you think?
So, see, first of all, what are the castes or the kulams that come under the Dalit? See, there is oppression even today. There's untouchability even today, but what section of it? Now there's this new thing that is coming up called Dalit Muslim, and then there's Dalit Christian, and then there's this, Pasmadas think that they're also Dalits. So if there is caste system and it's there only in Hinduism, first of all, let us accept that caste system is part of Hinduism. We agree on this?
So it's part of the Hindu society.
As part of the Hindu society, right? The kulam or the jati or the varna, whatever, it is part of the Hindu.
So
right?
Right. So the idea is that the caste is different, right? We talked about caste as a colonial construct. So
Whatever.
jati, varna, the kulam and all that, that's part of the social structure that we have. Yes.
Of Sanatana Dharma, right?
Of our society, correct. Right.
Of our Hindu society.
Correct.
Right? Okay. So whether it's happening from 2,500 years, 25,000 years, whatever numbers you'd like to give it, if that was happening, how come we've had so many social reformers over and over and over again? It's not just the Trimatas like Shankaracharya, Madhvacharya, Ramanujacharya. We've had so many people who have denounced this whole caste discrimination or even gender discrimination. In India, they have been great stalwarts like Bhagavad Ramanuja who were against caste and gender discrimination. So if Dalits are being oppressed today, that is because of the politics, I would say, because of the vote bank. We are 30 crore. We make 30 crore. The population of the Dalits clubbing the SC and the ST together is 30 crores. That's a huge vote bank. So if that is what is happening today, could have been the same before as well. Who would know? Because there's so many texts within the Sri Vaishnava Sampradaya. I can list out so many texts that actually denounce discrimination of any human being based on their caste, gender, financial status, or anything.
Correct, and that's widespread. Like we talk about the bhakti saints, the bhakti sampradayas, all the Nath sampradayas.
Even before. Yeah,
exactly.
Even before the Bhakti movement. So Bhakti movement, even if we go as far back as, to the Alvars as the 6th century or even the 5th and 6th century, even before that, we've had very great, reformers who actually denounce all this.
Correct, and that's so the bottom line is, as you said, is reform is part of our society, right? Even
social
though we had
social injustice is part of our society.
Correct, exactly. So every time there was oppression and there were things going on, there were challenges to that from the beginning. Like you said, with Ramanujacharya, Shankaracharya, or others, right? More recently as well, and they continue even today. If you look at the sampradayas, right? If you look at some of the sampradaya you're part of, or other movements in India, right? The fact that Mata Amritanandamayi is considered one of the greatest saints, living saint today, and she's technically, if you use these labels, right? I don't like these labels, but technically she's from the lower caste, right?
Yeah.
Why would a saint like Amritanandamayi, who becomes a hugging saint with like millions and millions of followers, be considered sacred in our tradition? And
the number of educational institutes, medical services, and the amount of social work that she does.
Yes, that exactly.
Taken into consideration. And even before all these people, so coming back to the Sri Vaishnava Sampradaya, we have 12 alvars, out of which 3 of them belong to the so-called Dalit community, and they were deified even before the 8th century. They are worshipped on par, in fact, even greater than God, because the reason why the Hindu society gives more respect to the gurus or the acharyas is because it's the guru or the acharya who can lead you to the path of God. To understand spirituality or to understand yourself or the Paramatma, you can't do it just by yourself. You need the guru. This is what we agree with across the board in Sanatana Dharma. So this is the reason why the alvars and the acharyas are given even higher spiritual, they are spiritually regarded supreme than the Bhagwan himself.
Let's talk about Ambedkar ji, right? Because he has made a huge impact on Indian society and for the communities, right, who are facing a lot of oppression. I do believe he was a product of his time. The time that he was in, there was a lot of issues going on. So he had to stand up for the rights of the depressed classes and things like that. But let's talk about him a little bit. What is, what's really interesting is people say he hated Hinduism. What are your thoughts on that? And what about, like, recently there was a discussion about how Ambedkarji actually wanted to make Sanskrit the national language of India, right?
Yes.
So there's like all this like sort of complex. It's not just breaking it down like, okay, one thing about Ambedkarji, right? Tell me a little bit more about your perspective on that.
Okay, so if you the first thing I'd like to mention is Baba Saheb was a product of Columbia University, and while he was there, he studied quite a few subjects a lot of people know, and then he's also written a lot of books, speeches, letters. If you notice, right from really Hindu phobic books, it's not that he hasn't written horrible things about Islam or Christianity. He's written horrible things about Hinduism, about Islam, about Christianity and Buddhism. So riddles of Hinduism, or who are the Shudras, and books like that. He has cussed Hindu gods. If you read Partition of Pakistan and what he's written about the Islamic invasions and the Muslim society here in India, he would be numero uno Islamophobe if he was alive today, because he's written horrible caustic stuff about Muslims as well. And he was absolutely against Christian conversion and proselytization in the name of financial aid and healing and all that. He's written about all of them. And even Baba Sahib, when he did study our Vedas, Upanishads, Shastras, or anything, it was again from a very Western perspective, through a Western lens. This is my understanding after having read everything. But I can also say that he evolved as a person, from being a Hindu hater to being an Islamic hater, and then towards the fag end of his life, when he converted to Buddhism, I think his writing evolved and his philosophy and thinking did evolve. So he did think about social inclusion and wanted the best for our nation. He was a nationalist before being anything else. He was economist, he was this, he was that, he was a lot. But social inclusion, I think you will find that across the board in all his writings.
Yeah, so he loved India as a culture, as a civilization, which is very clear from his writings. It's just, I think he was against all forms of social exclusion, whether it's in Hinduism or in the Hindu society, not necessarily the religion, or in Muslim society, or in Christian society, or even Buddhist society, any of the places where he would see social exclusion. I think he was against all of that. It did not matter a religion or not, I think. But one of the things that I did not find in his writings was and over the last so many years, a lot of things have come out of how the British actually tinkered with the society, right? So that piece was missing from what I understand from his writing. And I think if that piece was included, maybe there was something different that he may have thought of as well. So that's at least my understanding of it. Again, I'm not an expert in it.
No, but the thing is, Baba Saheb, his teachings, his writings, or anything, he is an icon even today. He a political icon, right? Votes are still, people, the politicians still come begging for votes in the name of Baba Saheb.
People understand again.
So Ambedkar, Baba Saheb is still relevant even today.
Yeah. So let's talk about that, because I think it's very important as we kind of come to sort of an end to this section. What does Baba Saheb's message hold for relevant for all of us, right? Society, whether you're Hindu or not Hindu, what is his message relevance today?
So it is still very, very relevant because he insisted on education. So this whole thing about reservation started based on education, and then bringing the oppressed, depressed society at least on par with the mainstream society. So he insisted the most on education and development. Education is the key. So if you want to end this caste dynamics or this caste politics or this discrimination of any sort, I think education is the key. Social inclusion is the key. Education and social inclusion is the way forward. This is something that was advocated by him.
Yeah, and that has to be done by all sections of society, right? The ones sort of yeah, exactly. So the society has to be done, has to take that extra step to make sure there's social inclusion, there's education, and all of us need to work together on that. If we are all, I always maintain that this is a family issue, right? And we as a family as brothers and sisters, fellow Hindu brothers and sisters, we need to fix this problem within our family.
And we are very capable of doing it too.
Exactly. And I think that's what I was talking to a few other people as well. And they said, look, it's going to take a while, but it is happening slowly and slowly as education comes around, as new generations come around, right? The idea of oppression, this whole idea of untouchability is slowly going to go away. It takes a while because India is a huge, large society. There are a lot of political, I would say, political agendas at play, right? People don't want to get rid of this whole caste politics, as I call it, because then the vote bank goes away, right? So if and then Baba Sahib today, if he was alive, he would hate that because he would not want that to happen, because that is actually deeply entrenching the caste dynamics that he was against. Yes. So so it takes a really long time to get rid of that, right? But I'm sure that as thanks to you, activists like yourselves and others, we will come to that point, and we as people sitting in the U.S. would be more than willing to work with you and others to make this change happen, because I think it's a family. We are a family, and it's a family issue that we need to work together on. Let's make sure we work on that. Now, before we get to some Q&A, I want one more point about the kind of this neo-Ambedkarite movement, right? There are certain issues going on in the U.S. as well as in India, and there are very selective narratives about Baba Sahib himself and about this whole caste. Tell us a little bit more about your thoughts on that.
Okay, so like we discussed, this new Ambedkarite movement is a political movement. They stand against almost everything that Baba Sahib had either written or spoken about. I had given you an example about this Jai Bhim, Jai Meen. Those are oxymorons. Stuff like Dalit Christian, that's an oxymoron. Okay, constitutionally, there's no word called Dalit, and certainly there's no word called Dalit Christian. New Ambedkarites, especially like the third generation of Baba Sahib, along with some vested interests, Islamic vested interests or Christian conversion vested interests, they try to bring about this new narrative. Like most recently in my home state of Telangana, an IPS officer was caught, he's in service, he's very much in service. He's a government servant, and he was caught taking those very offensive, like, I'm a Dalit, I don't have to agree with everything that Baba Sahib has said, written, or advocated. He, being an IPS officer belonging to the scheduled caste community, he was caught on camera taking those 22 offensive vows. I call them offensive because they're against my Hindu religion. Those are extremely Hindu phobic. I don't know why, but in my personal opinion and my understanding of what I've seen, read, and I've come to understand over these years living here in India, is this new Ambedkarite movement is very, very, very much Hindu phobic. Very Hindu phobic.
Interesting,
and it's driven by a political agenda, and it's extremely well funded as well. Extremely
Then some writers have written about this, right? The whole idea of this exploiting the fault lines of the Indian society by outside forces aligning with some of these inside forces and to destabilize the society. And those dynamics are also being played out here. That's a different conversation that we will have, because as we see this kind of issue spreading from the U.S., what we're seeing is these resolutions being passed, these so-called policies are being evaluated without a thorough understanding of the society, the social dynamics, and a very colonial viewpoint that just talks about how it's like almost like 200 years ago the British were talking about caste and their obsession with caste, right? And all of a sudden you have people in the U.S. sitting here, and again they're obsessed with caste. Understanding of there's like a shortcut to understanding Indian society is caste. So they're looking at it and saying, okay, let's pass these laws.
Basically the Hindu, because there are caste problems even in Islam and Christianity. We can do another podcast on that. But it's not just Indian, it's Hindu.
Right. It's not just Indian. It's actually the targeting is selectively on one religion.
Yeah.
Exactly. And they're also, in doing so, they're defining what Hinduism is. As you said, that
it's just hate.
Yeah.
Nikunji, you would agree. All of us, NRIs living abroad in any part of the world, we are the most educated. We pay the highest taxes. We do not have any criminal records. Ideal citizens, the Indian diaspora. I don't know why they're spewing this much hate. especially against us.
Yeah, it's unfortunate, and then there are a lot of that's another conversation we have to have. But the challenge we face is,
This new Ambedkar thing is being funded from there, and
yes, it
it's
is.
the whole because we have very strict laws now against foreign funding, the FRCA. So at least I'm glad that our Indian government's doing pretty good. At least the central government, the NDA, we've had a lot of policy changes, and that's helping. We have laws and everything in place. We have the SC/ST atrocity. I know all laws are being misused, but we have laws, sanctions, policies, and everything in place to look after uh, our family.
Yeah, our people, right? That makes sense, and I think it's just like any other country would not want interference from another country. I think India is in the same situation. So thank you for bringing that point up. Now we have a few more minutes left. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask you a few questions that came in. There are a bunch of questions which we covered some of them, but let's talk about this. So one of the questions is, can we, the Indian government has the policies around intercaste. Do Hindu gurus talk about it, right? How do Hindu gurus talk about intercaste marriages or a way for intercaste marriages and social inclusion in general? Can you maybe share some, based on your experience from your sampradaya, for example?
So in my sampradaya, we do not have any gurus talking down about intercaste marriage and anything like that. At least in my Sri Vaishnava sampradaya, with my Acharya Chinnajiyar, we don't have anything like that. In fact, he advocates ghar vapsi. So anybody who's converted from Hinduism and has become a Christian or a Muslim, he will do a ghar vapsi, bring you back and make you feel socially included in the society. So intercaste marriages are absolutely fine. There are several gurus out there. They might be having problems with it. I'm not aware, but at least in my sampradaya, it's absolutely fine. You marry for love. You marry for your own reasons. It has nothing to do with caste.
Yeah, and I've had a similar experience. Some of the gurus that I've talked to and stuff like that from different sampradayas, they don't really personally get involved in this. They're like, it's really up to the couple. Who, if as long as they are spiritual, if they are connected to each other from a spiritual perspective, this idea of caste and this and that, it doesn't really have an impact, because that's not what the Hindu dharma really subscribes to. So thank you for bringing that up. Now, but the problem that we face is that when it comes to human beings, there's just the regular society people, there's always this issue about intercaste, right? Oh, we don't marry into this caste, or what is your caste, right? Sometimes you have that. How do you think that has it? Doesn't that play against the Hindus, right? When we talk, like when gurus say something, right? When our texts say something, but the regular Hindus themselves are not following that, isn't that a issue?
It definitely is an issue. The problem is caste has been so deeply embedded into the Indian psyche that it's now translating into the Western society as well. The thing is, there are a few people who continuously obsess. There are probably a few sampradayas and gurus as well who might be hearing this, who are obsessing about caste and who are probably against intercaste marriage and stuff like that. But then again, if you think about it, that, like you said, it goes against the concept of Sanatana Dharma, of social inclusion. So texts can vary, sampradayas can vary, the philosophies, like in Vedanta itself, you have three different schools, the three main different schools. So thoughts could vary, but as a society and as a family, I think we need to get over this caste obsession, because the more we are going to concentrate on this, the more power we are actually going to give, to these political miscreants, I would like to call them.
Yeah, true.
Who are fueling this divide.
Yeah, so the onus is upon us, and the onus is upon our societies collectively to denounce this, and which I think, as I would say, Hindus who believe in moving forward and who believe in going back to the source of the Hindu tradition, right? We stand against such discrimination. All kinds of discrimination, the caste-based discrimination, different types of things. We are standing, but as a society, sorry, go ahead.
Gender-based discrimination or financial discrimination, any sort of discrimination, because if Paramatma or reaching Paramatma or moksha is your goal, this is certainly not going to help.
Absolutely, and it goes against your. It's like the ahankara. The idea of ahankara stops
All
you
the
from
upadhis, all the
exactly.
upadhis.
You
Yeah.
bring upadhis, correct? Exactly. So these and interestingly, these Sanskrit terms are not talked about much, but it's very important from a philosophical perspective. Now, but that does not mean that discrimination is not there, right? What
It is
what we have
atrocities
absolutely.
keep happening. So the National Crime Bureau in India that reports our crimes, they are crimes against the Dalit community, basically because they are financially, politically oppressed, depressed, and they are being manipulated a lot. So of course there are crimes, and there are not voices who are going to talk about this election. If there's an election coming by, of course politicians will be knocking at your door. Other than that, they get ignored for the rest of the years after the election. So what is happening is, yes, definitely there are atrocities. Like I said, National Commission of Scheduled Caste is there, National Commission of the Scheduled Tribe is there. We have our legal bodies, looking into all of this, and the crime ratio against the depressed and oppressed classes. But it's happening across the board. It's happening even with anybody who comes from the weaker section of the Hindu society,
Yeah.
not just the scheduled caste.
Yeah, interestingly, like I was reading somewhere that a lot of this has to do with land, because so many times there, the workers who are on the land, or people who have debts paid to the land, right? And there's like a major issue when it comes to like so when it comes to rape, right? It's like, so the Dalit women, for example, have a double whammy, right? They are from a lower section, but also they are women, right? So they face the worst atrocities as far as this is concerned. And but a lot of times it has to do with not just religious stuff, as we talked about. It's also in the Muslims, it's also in the Hindus, etc. But it has to do with like the whole idea of land. And I was reading a couple of instances where these people's lands were either taken away or they could not pay their debts. So they ended up being either, their women were raped, or they were being thrown out, they're beaten. So these things do happen. So while the world focuses on, oh, these are the religious issues within the Hindus, they completely ignore the idea of like the economics, this whole economic dynamics that.
Economic dynamics is the main thing. Thank you, Nikunji, for bringing this up. Economic dynamics is the main thing. So you will not see atrocities like this happening on the actual landowners. So it's not like the Dalit communities do not own land. They do not fall under that EWS scheme, the picture that we just shared, right?
Yes.
So Dalit communities who own land as well, who employ other Dalits as well, who employ people from other communities as well. If you remember, I was telling you about that Stanley Medical College, where the vice chancellor, who belonged to the scheduled caste community, even though she had personally converted into Christianity a few years ago, apparently she was very biased to the upper caste students and was repeatedly failing them in academics and the
So
practice
it's
of.
like it's reverse discrimination in a way.
Yes.
It's interesting. Okay, I didn't.
Yeah. Nobody talks about this, even though it doesn't get reported that much as well.
A couple of things for you. Number one is, what do you do nowadays on the ground to change these things, right? How are you working with these, whether it's in small cities or big cities, rural areas? I know we talked about you're focusing a lot on rural areas, especially with women and children. So tell us a little bit about your work and how we can join that work.
Okay, so my main areas where I work are Dalit women and children. The next is with our temples, our Gaumata, our sannyasis, our daughters. And what is happening is these are being very systematically targeted. Okay, so another problem is the interreligious uh, uh, atrocities that are happening on our communities. So what I do is I go to the rural areas and find out exactly under what circumstances and why the Dalit community is converting to the Abrahamic faith. And I also perform these Gharwapsis and bring them back. Also, our organization has been working with a lot of rape cases and Dalit women, especially minors, being attacked. So we work there, and also temples. Temples are a huge issue. Land grabbing is happening in temples, at least in both the Telugu-speaking states. So that is a huge problem. And of course, our sannyasis are being attacked. So temples are being desecrated. Our sannyasis are being attacked. Our daughters are being attacked. And of course, the Gau Mata, who we respect so much, is also under attack. So these are the key areas. And anybody who would like to contribute to Dharma can contribute in these following ways. And this is something that my Ekalavya Guru Rajiv Malhotra ji also keeps repeating. So you can contribute intellectually, you can contribute financially, you can contribute legally, or you can contribute on the ground, or you can do all four. So
yeah, we're going to do that. Actually,
so, yeah, and also it's going the legal way, like filing FIRs. I do that all the time. So if I see something is going wrong, I do file FIRs, and the SC/ST Atrocity Act is actually a good thing if it's used correctly. I know it's being misused. I agree, but then again, that is the only thing that comes to our rescue when our minor daughters go missing.
Yeah, exactly.
Missing. That is a saving grace for us. The SC/ST Act and the POCSO and POCMA Act.
Yeah, they are meant to protect, right?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. So from our side, consider us your allies, right? We look forward to working with everybody. I think, like I said, this is for me. Having Ramanujacharya in the background inspires me quite a bit, because he started 1,000+ years ago something which was also very important, and it was continuing that tradition. So we as Hindus, I mean, our parting message to everybody is like, we are against any discrimination. We are against caste-based discrimination that across, but it's a societal problem that we have to do. We are not going to allow blaming of Hinduism or blaming of our religion for this. We're not allowing people to define our religion along these caste lines, because that's a very colonial and racist way of doing it. We will work together with our brothers and sisters from the marginalized communities to address issues that are impacting us. Financially, we will be helping. Socially, we will be helping in everything. And people like yourselves who are on the forefront, we will be working with yourselves, just like people like you in Bharat, in here, to make sure that our brothers and sisters are helped as we go forward, because that is ultimately what Hindu Dharma is, right? We talk about Krinavantam Vishwamaryam, right? We are here, may the whole world be noble, may the whole world be well. And if we're talking about the whole world, we can't forget our brothers and sisters first, right? We start with our brothers and sisters. We start with our family first, and then we go to other people. So I want to thank you very much for joining us today.
For that wonderful conclusion. That was amazing. Thank you.